in 3, 2, 1.
Good morning and welcome to Kirklees Corporate Parenting Board here on Tuesday the 12th of July. Welcome to everybody who's managed to join us either in person or online. I hope we've resolved technical difficulties as such. So, Jodie, the first item is apologies, membership of the board and apologies. Have we any apologies, please?
Yes, we do. So we have apologies from Elaine McShane, Councillor Patterson, Mel Meggs, Barry Lockwood, Keely Lucas, Farah Mania and Christine Carmichael.
Thank you very much. Minutes of the previous meeting, colleagues. Are there any issues arising from that? Any corrections or any issues that we aren't going to be covering in the agenda that urgently need to be covered? I'm looking for anybody's concern about that. No? We feel that these are a correct record. I know people won't have had that much time to read them. I'll take it that those are a correct record. If anything arises, people see something that they would like to address, if they get in touch with us later, and we will deal with that. Interest, can I remind members of the board, if you have any declarable interest, please complete the form in your pack and send it to Jodie as soon as possible, please. Thank you. So this is a meeting held in public, so all items are open to the public. Have we any deputations or petitions, please, Jodie?
No deputations or petitions received, thank you.
Thank you. Public question time. Have we any public questions?
No public questions, thank you.
All right, and we move therefore on to item 7, which is the Children's Performance Highlight Report. There are several people who contribute to this, but I do believe that Ophelia Ricks is going to start us off with it. Over to you, Ophelia. Thank you.
Good morning, panel. I'm Ophelia Ricks, Head of Corporate Parenting Board. What I want to do is to focus today on the information presented. And the focus that I want to look at is the number of children who we have looked after. Because as you can see from the data, there is a declining trend in relation to the information. But I just wanted to put some context around that in relation to the numbers of looked after children. So just in relation to the information, between January and May of this year, we had a number of 73 children who became looked after. And during the same period, we've had 87 children who are no longer looked after. So as you can see from the information, we are still, as a local authority, children are becoming looked after for the right reasons, but also we are very much more timely and efficient in the way that we are securing outcomes for our children and young people. So within the data of the 87 children, young people, we had 23 during the same period who we've successfully secured a special guardianship order. So a special guardianship order is where children remain within their family, so that means that they don't need to be looked after by the local authority. So I think that's really positive. So that means we're seeing an increasing trend in the number of SGOs, so special guardianship orders. So we're now at 500 young people. So if we added that together, we would have 1,000 children looked after, and we don't want that because clearly it's really important. And going back to the Children Act, and the essence and the ethos of that is about where we should be keeping children, young people at home. So that's where we spend a lot of time and effort and energy ensuring that that happens. But I just want to say, if it's not right and safe for the child and where there's significant safeguarding issues, then the child will remain looked after. So I just needed to assure the panel that, you know, we're doing the right thing for the children at the right time. So I think that's really important. And also just coming back to the numbers that are no longer looked after, we had 23 young people who were successfully returned home to family. Again, so that's really positive. So you'll see from our data that we do, so that that has then our data around looked after children, placed with parents at home. You'll see an increase in that. But again, I think that's a really positive, good news story. So, because we are having children going back home, because that's what the family want and that's what the children want. So, and some of that we've achieved that through the multi-systemic family integration therapy team. So we've had 5 children who, through the MST, have gone home. So that, again, that's been really positive. They've been looked after for a significant period of time, so I would say 5 years plus, but then we've been successful in getting them home. So again, I think that's really positive for us. So although I think, you know, there are some concerns around the numbers of children looked after, I think it's appropriate because we're doing the right things by our children, young people. And also, just in relation to that, we've got 16 children who are young people who have remained with their carers. So again, under the stay put policy. So again, the refresh and the revise of the stay put policy has been an absolute positive. And I think, and we are seeing an increase in children, young people who are wanting to stay post 18. So we will continue to advocate for that and continue to promote that. It does impact then on the availability of foster carers, because if they've got staying put, then that reduces the number of foster carers available for children, young people. But that's something that, as a service, and obviously Tom will talk about that in relation to what we're doing. So on one hand, we are having foster carers who are keeping children, young people, which is a benefit to them because they've got those relationships. So that, and then we've had 6 who've been adopted through that time as well. And just to say, we've also had 7 children where we've concluded on no order. So the children remained at home and we've not had to have an interim care order or any order. They've been able to stay at home on that basis. And then there's a remaining 12. There's a variance of reasons why. So I just felt it was really important just to set the context really in relation to children are still becoming looked after. But we're much more creative and we're much more linked in with the families and the communities in terms of children being reunited back, because we should never lose sight of family. Because I think that's really important, that we should always look, can the child go back home, and is it safe for the children and young people to go back home? So that's what I really wanted to say, just in terms of our looked after children. So I wanted to, are there any specific questions in relation to that, and then I'll move on to care experience young people.
Councillor Marchington.
Yeah, not a question, I feel, but just really thanking you for that. Children's Scrutiny has expressed a concern about the relatively low numbers of children looked after, and that explanation of, you know, actually the numbers of children under special guardianship orders who are effectively remaining with family, but wider family, and then the 23 have returned to family. So that's a significant numbers of children who might have been looked after who are not. And of course we can compare ourselves with other authorities, but it's really good to see that work going on in Kirklees, and the understanding that you've given us through your narrative of the data as well. So I appreciate it. So thank you for all the work that's been done in response to questions that have been asked by particularly scrutiny panel members, but also members of this panel over a period of time. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I have to say, I do feel it's the right direction of travel, and I meet with lead members across Yorkshire and Humberside, and they have much higher numbers, but they haven't put the investment in that Kirklees has put into multi-systemic therapy, family group conferencing and so on, and that real push about kinship carers and special guardianship owners. And I think you're absolutely right, that connection to family is absolutely key to children and young people if it's somewhere safe and able to be maintained. So good stuff, and we'd like to see that continuing on.
Sorry, just again, because again it's really a lot of questions that have been after a period of time. I think that your explanation, Ophelia, of the 73 children who have now become children looked after. So again, children are still, being looked after when that is absolutely the right thing to do. So that I think that's fine. And I think the other reason why it's really good to have that narrative is at a time when you might expect there to be more children looked after post-pandemic, and in that period because of the stresses and strains both families and children have been under, and it's really good to know that numbers are going down, and we've got a really good understanding of why that is happening. And no doubt other people will be asking questions about it, but we can return to this narrative and just reassure them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Can I just take us further through this performance report? Anybody got any questions or comments on the looked after reviews, visits and missing items? Councillor Law.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just the item on the bottom of page, I think it's 17 or 18, they're kind of overlapped, but in the report pack, where it talks about the postponed meeting of the police, with the police. It was supposed to be rescheduled to February 22. Has that meeting taken place? And it's about highlighting the number of missing episodes where we questioned how young people had been reported missing.
Is anybody able to respond to that?
If I can just say, I think it would be helpful to provide a focus around our children missing and the detail that sits behind that. So rather than just giving a part response, I think it'd be really important if we can put that on the agenda so that we just focus specifically on the context of the work that's being undertaken in relation to our missing children. So if I can ask that to be itemised for the next corporate board in August, please, that would be really helpful.
Thank you. I think that's a good suggestion. And it is that fact of when a young person is missing, potentially it leads them open to exploitation, doesn't it? And, that's something that the council's worked really hard on. But so I do think for us to have that as a specific agenda item would be most welcome. Councillor, to come
No,
back.
agreed, Chair. Agreed. Thank you.
Anybody else on that? We move on to looked after children's educational outcomes, although I am aware we've got a virtual school report, so perhaps, Janet, you only want to say something minor on this because it may steal your thunder from the next item.
Hi, good morning, Chair. Janet Tolley, Virtual School Head Teacher. So I'm happy just to take you through the headlines at this point. So we're looking at page 18 and 19 in the report. I think it is important to say that there has been some nationally published data, which is available through the LATE, the Local Authority Interactive Tool. It's the first time there's been some nationally published data for a while with COVID and the impact in terms of examinations and assessments for our young people. The data was published for Key Stage 4 for absence data and exclusions data. For all of the attainment and progress indicators at Key Stage 4, Kirklees Virtual School was quartile banding A, and actually the highest national ranking, and one of the points was 11th in the country. So strong performance at Key Stage 4, and this was for the 2021 data. In terms of absence and exclusions, also quartile banding A, with slightly lower than that for our PA and our unauthorised absence. And I'll talk about those in more detail when we do look at the governing body information. Just in terms of the summary, in terms of the statutory indicators for personal education plans, working with social workers, designated teachers in schools, other professionals, carers, and young people. Young people sometimes attend these planning meetings. 100% every term in timescale. In terms of the initial PEPs, which we try to have within 10 working days of a young person coming into care, actually all but 3 this academic year have taken place in timescale. And actually the 3 young people that went over was exceptional circumstances and took place on day 11. So, that seems to be working really well. In terms of school moves, again, working really well. 91% have had very smooth transitions with no break at all. Only 2 young people over the statutory 20-day timescale, and they were both unaccompanied asylum seekers who joined us without a school place. And really that was about taking the time to find appropriate provision rather than rushing into something that maybe wasn't going to take them through to their post-16 education. In terms of what do we want to improve, we're really conscious about the impact of the COVID time on our young people. I think, you know, we are starting to see some issues around emotional health and wellbeing and engagement for some of our young people. So we're very mindful of that and working with professionals to make sure we've got wraparound care and conversations so that young people are ready for learning, because obviously they need to be able to achieve. I've mentioned the persistent absentees and the unauthorised absence, which I'll cover later on. And actually, we have been successful, I think, in working across service to reduce the number of school moves. And whenever possible, you know, social workers and social work managers will involve the virtual school very early if there's a need for a placement move. Though we all understand that sometimes there are exceptional circumstances, things have to happen quickly, and then we work together as quickly as we can to move forward for the young person, something for their education that will meet their needs. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Janet. Any questions or comments from colleagues?
Thank you.
No, I think we await with excitement the next full item when we get to it as such. Could we move on in this performance report to look at the health issues, please?
Good morning, Jill Addy, designated nurse for looked after children in Kirklees. I will start with the initial health assessments, just in slightly different order to what you have on there. We're on page 20 now. The initial health assessments are generally very good. We have a really good team of paediatricians and specialist nurses working on this. We have had some challenges recently. You'll see that the data at the moment is showing in the 79.3% for the rolling 12 months and 75% on the monthly data for May. That word February shouldn't have been there. What I'd like to say is that in June we are back up to 100%, but we are talking about quite small numbers here. So the 79 or 75% for May equates to just 3 breaches. So small numbers can really impact on the percentage. But in July, we have found some challenges that are continuing. And this is sometimes it's something that we just, it's very difficult to rectify in very tight timescales, which have to be done within 20 working days. Example of this would be a sibling group, perhaps that's placed outside of Kirklees. A good reason for that is that they can be placed with family, which for the children is obviously better. We then have to make other arrangements to make that happen. So we need a paediatrician or a doctor. And in a recent case, we've actually brought the children back to Kirklees so that we can see them, to get them done in as timely way as possible. We're still having to use a hybrid model because of the COVID restrictions in the clinics. So when I say that, it means that the paediatrician speaks on the telephone to the parents if they're available, the carers, the child, the social worker, and a lot of that information is gathered by telephone, and then the child is brought into clinic with the carer and parents if necessary to actually do the developmental face-to-face part of that assessment. So things are taking longer, and we have very limited clinic time, once a week usually. But everybody works extra clinics if possible, just to fit these in where we can. The review health assessments are showing very healthy still, because the Kirklees 12-month rolling data is showing information obviously over the last 12 months. What you will then see is that the monthly data for May is showing a decline. And this is less than we used to do them. We used to do them very well in timescales. And I know that for June, we've declined those percentages again. I'm in communication with the Commissioner and Councillor Kendrick about what things we can actually do about this, because we do know why these numbers are declining. Just an example, we know, and I speak to my team of nurses as to what's happening in there, and the complexities of the children are increasing. since COVID. The communication with carers, professionals, has increased significantly from the times of COVID. And you think, well, why is that? It's because at one point we were available on telephone, on mobiles for carers, and that's continued, which is a good thing. But every telephone call increases the actual work that's needed to be done for those children. We've got access to information on System 1, which informs our assessment. This has increased our time for doing review health assessments significantly, because most GPs in Kirklees are using System 1 now, as are A&E and lots and lots of therapies and the mental health service, and we can see information and have access to the information that we never used to have, but it's there and we do need to comment on it in our assessments, and it makes our assessments absolutely top quality. So I can't persuade the nurses not to use that information. It's really important to actually give everybody an informed view of the health of those children. The expertise in the team has grown. My team has been with me for a long time. They have got particularly good at their jobs, and when they need or they see something needs doing after a health assessment, they lead on it quite often, whereas perhaps at one time they'd have signposted, but because they are so good at what they do now, they've got all the links, they do tend to then make sure that the children get what they need and come back and actually do those referrals instead of asking someone else to do it. That adds on to the time. The other local authority children that have come to live in Kirklees from other areas, they've been increasing, and quite often they come with their own challenges, and that impacts on my work as well. We're involved in lots of strategy meetings, but I also need our team to be involved in that, and the 0 to 19 in Locala as well. We need to keep our contacts with these private children's homes that are opening, and this is all impacting on our capacity and affecting just how we can do things timely, because we always make sure that we do our absolute best. Access to homes to do the assessments. COVID is still around, as you're aware, and we can arrange to go to a house to do an assessment, and that morning we get a call to say we can't go. And also COVID has impacted my team as well. They've continued to work throughout. They haven't had off, but they've done work as in writing up assessments, etc., while they've been at home, and I'm very grateful to them for continuing to do that. We've got unaccompanied asylum-seeking children that we've seen an increase in, both in Kirklees but also other local authorities placing these young people in our area. And for our practitioners, our health practitioners, we are from provider services in Locala, and we have a responsibility to provide support as requested. We do their health assessments, and that all adds on to our workload. So I just want to assure you that all assessments take place. So all the review health assessments do take place. If they are delayed by anything, it's by a small delay, as small as possible. And this is in comparison to our neighbours who are finding the same things in our regional neighbours as well. It's across the board really. But I am in communication with other people to explain why these numbers have come down. And we're working on it all the time. The dental checks are better than what's actually shown there, because I've just got the June information, and for children under 5, 91% of the review health assessments that were done in May, 91% of the children under 5 were seen by a dentist in the last 6 months, and for children over 5, 97% have been seen by a dentist. So that's showing that things are hopefully going back in the right direction. And the register of the dentist, we asked them at their review health assessments, so those figures are 69% for the under 5s and 96% for over 5s, and that's really good for teenagers because they may not want to go and register with a dentist, but we do make sure as far as possible that we get them there. And the use of the flexible commissioning project is still in operation, so we do have some dental surgeries that we can access if the foster carers struggle to get some registration. And the substance misuse is just affecting the 6 young people that we've known about for a long time. They will stay on there until their next review health assessment. So actually, some of those young people may not be affected now. Hopefully, they've been in treatment and they may well be off that. When we next see them for their review health assessment, which should be a year after the last one, it may be that those young people come off that list. But it's very low compared to the national average. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, anybody have any questions? Councillor Lawson.
Just a quick question. One is about the registered dentist item. We have the 69% versus the 96% versus 4 and 5 under 5-year-olds and over. Do we have any idea why that disparity appears? 69 to 96 is quite a bit. I mean, is it a numbers? It is a numbers thing. Is it a low numbers thing?
Yeah,
or?
some dentists will say just bring the child along if they're young babies. You know, come and sit on the knee. They don't necessarily have to be registered as such. They just get used to coming to the surgery, and then eventually they will register them as NHS patients. Sometimes we might have children placed with family and friends, and we need to just perhaps support them more to access a dentist and to make that call. Because when you are making a call to a dentist, if it's not something that particularly you've been involved in before, it's quite something to go there and register those children and recognise. So we've got all the health people that will be involved in those children, getting them registered and support there. So I shouldn't read too much into that. I think COVID has had a massive impact on people being able to register. But we know at the review health assessments that we will get them registered with a dentist locally. And the 96% is, that is because a lot of our older children were already registered with dentists before. These will probably be newer children that have come in. When they come into care, we expect them to register with a dentist within a short space of time, but sometimes there will be a delay with certain dentists. And what we won't find out is that in that meantime, they have registered. It's just that we haven't seen them for their review health assessment for another 6 months. But when they come again, hopefully they will be on that. So when we look at who's not registered with dentists, it's generally new into care, moved placements, that type of thing, where they need to then re-register, or they're new into care and they need to register. But it's always ongoing.
Yeah, I was just looking for a little bit of clarity behind those figures, that's all. It's good to know it's there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Richard Smith has his hand up. Richard.
Thank you. Good morning. Mine's not really a question about the figures. Sorry, this is awful noise. I'm hearing a lot of noise in the background. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sorry, yes.
Yeah, I was just wondering, at some point, this is not for today, but at some point, would you be able to give us a bit more information on the virtual school and how it works, whether that's for this board or just an option for members of the board to do on a offline basis? It'd be really useful for me anyway to just have a little bit more info about how the virtual school works. And you know, I understand the figures you've presented, but the model itself, I'll be really interested to find out a little bit more about that. And as I say, it's not for today's meeting, but in the future perhaps. I don't know whether that's something for the board or whether it's something we could do at a separate meeting for those of us who wish to attend. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. I mean, our next item after this one is about the virtual school. That may assist you, but I am absolutely sure that Janet Tolley would be very willing to do a separate session with people who have an interest, who want to know more. So if it just... Hello?
Hi, it's Colleen here. I have put my hand up on virtual.
All right, Colleen.
Hiya. I just wanted to say, as a foster care and also chair at KFN, that virtual school and the looked after nurses do an absolutely fantastic job, and we're, as foster carers, are really happy with the service that they provide. It's instant, the follow-up, they get back to you. So all credit to you ladies and your teams for everything that you do for foster carers and our looked after children.
Thank you
very much for that comment. I think it's really important for people who are pedalling hard and working hard to hear what they do is much appreciated. And I know Jill has talked about things that they want to achieve for children looked after's health. And it is a bit about, you have quite high standards, you and your team, Jill, and you don't like to see it drop. They're very comparable elsewhere, and in fact far better than a lot of other places. But I admire your ambition to continually improve. But we will meet up on another occasion, yourself and Stuart Horn and I, and to look at some of the pressures that are on your service to see if there's anything further we can do to help.
Thank you.
If we can just, I don't think we've anybody here who can talk about the convictions part of this report, have we? I don't think there's anything of great concern at the moment. I mean, it has a continuing improving performance, and we'll look at that separately on another occasion. The other part of the report, we have care leavers. I don't know if there's anything specifically you want to say, Ophelia.
Yeah, I'll just come into that because I think it's important to note, just in relation to looking at our care experience young people, we now have a personal advisor allocated to all young people who are 17 plus. So you can see from the data, we are now at 97.4%. So I think it's really the value of being noted today in relation to that. On the ones that are not allocated is because the young people are not, so we just need to do some data tidy up around that. It's where they're not qualifying, where they're qualifying and we're not required to allocate a personal advisor, so we just need to look at that. But I think we've done quite a lot of work to ensure that, and again, it's that seamless transition from a social worker to a personal advisor. So it's about building those early relationships, which is really key. I want to be ambitious, and I want to look at us even allocating our personal advisors or having somebody working with our young people at 16 and a half, because I think that's quite a critical age, but we've got some work to do in relation to achieving that. But I think we've been really successful in being able to now ensure that all our care experienced young people now have a personal advisor who they can contact and look at ask any questions in addition to the social worker. So I think that's been a really positive piece of work that we've done. As you can see, that we're seeing a continued improvement in relation to our personal advisors who are keeping in touch with our care experienced young people. We do have young people who are saying thanks but no thanks. So again, we've got to think about how do we record that, because I think there is an area. So that's some of our 9%. In relation to that, they are the young people who don't want to see us. So that's something that we've got to work out. And then I suppose it's how then do we present that back here in terms of the analysis and the rationale for the reasons why young people don't want to have a contact with the personal advisors. Some of them have got really positive lives. They've got other people that are there working with, so they don't want a personal advisor. In terms of young people in suitable accommodation, as you can see from the data, there's been a slight drop in relation to that. Where we have a number of young people who are in custody. So when they're in custody, that's when they're defined as not being in suitable accommodation. And I think that's right and appropriate in relation to that. So I think for the next board, I think it'd just be helpful just to provide the specific breakdown of how many are in custody and then what types of accommodation the other young people are in that are not suitable. So I think that would just be helpful for the board so that you've got that the context of that information. And then I'll come back to not in education, and then just looking at the pathway plans. Again, we've seen an improvement in relation to the timeliness of the pathway plans. We've got more work to do in relation to the timeliness, and some of that is about recording and not recording timely on our case records. So we'll continue to focus on that area of work. So they are getting done. It's just there are some sort of timeliness issues and staffing issues that have got in the way of that. And then one of our biggest concern is around our young people who are not in education, employment and training. We are doing some work. We have got a panel of representatives from across the council, and there are also external partners who are involved in that to look at what can we do differently, what do we need to do differently, and what opportunities are there out there that we can start tapping into in relation to that. So it'll be worthy of me bringing back a report that sets that out in relation to what do we know currently, because I think there's some work to be done with our care experienced young people to ask them what is it can we do differently in relation to, and what opportunities do we need to look at on your behalf. And again, it's increasing the work that we're doing with the virtual school as well, because we're working with young people post-18, which is really important. But the other end of that is about thinking about our earlier intervention as well. So what are we doing with young people at 14 plus in relation to those opportunities? So it's looking at both post-18, but also what are the earlier opportunities that we can provide for our young people, so we're not getting to 17 where they're not in employment, training or education. So we're looking at it from both ends in relation to that. So that's the work that we're doing, so we can provide that. And then for me, the challenge out as well is what our members doing as well. So what we're doing and what other opportunities are there out there. So I'd like some support and some contributions as well from all members and the communities really. So any offers are welcome. So that's me. Any questions?
And there's a challenge to councillors. Come on, find some support. How do we help and support there? Any questions or comments, colleagues? Councillor March.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, this is just in response to your request, Ophelia, because one of the things that's interesting me about the data is about care leavers that are in accommodation is around 87%, and so that seems to be quite positive. And there's sort of quite a difference between that and the number that are in employment, education, or training. So there's a sort of a degree of stability around accommodation, and I'd just be interested to know, those 31% who are in accommodation but are not in employment. What's that? And the thing that's twigged with me is I know there was an announcement from Wales, the Welsh Assembly Government, a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks ago, about the a minimum income guarantee for care leavers. And the primary mover behind that was about providing with that sort of stability around accommodation, so they didn't have to worry for I think it was either 12 months or 18 months. So I think there is some work about, if we can provide a level of stability for care leavers, what opportunities they're taking while there's that period of stability and in their lives.
Yeah, and that's the work that we're doing. So, and again, if they've got stability and they've got connected care, so a lot of the work that we're doing also is around some of our care experienced young people. Are there opportunities for them to return to the family for support as well? So again, we never lose sight of family communities in terms of linking that in. And what we are doing is looking at what have been the experiences of our young people. What could we have done sooner to look at those opportunities in relation to that. So I'll be able to, because we've got to project and forecast in terms of what are the future needs of our young people as well. So it's not just about the here and now, it's thinking about we've got young people who are now 16 and a half, 17, who will become care experienced young people. What are we doing in the here and now as well? And so it's that future projection, that forecasting in terms of what do we need, what we're going to need from communities, and what we're going to need from the corporate parent council as a whole in relation to meeting those needs and creating those opportunities for our young people. So it's work in progress really in terms of the work that we need to do. But I think it's really important that I present this across all the senior leadership teams in relation to, and then what is the offer? And what can we do? Because we would do that with our own children. I think that's something that we've got to do for all children who are looked after by Kirklees.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Colleen Kenworthy. I can't actually put my hand.
No, come in, Colleen.
Audio. I've got a question. Percentage of children that are not in employment, education, and things. Is there a ratio with staying put carers? Are the children that are in staying put more in education and in education training or employment? Is it support board and lodgings, or is it people that's in their own accommodation? I just wondered if there was some kind of chart to show which shows the most stability, and whether we should be promoting more staying put or different models so that children, obviously adults have got their own choices where they need to be, but is there a link between that?
Thank you for that question, Colleen. I think there's been a little bit of difficulty here in part of the chamber. I'm going to try and say in a very shorthand way what I think you've just asked. Colleen seems to be asking, is there any correlation between children who are in employment, education or training and those who are in staying put circumstances? And, you know, is there a difference if there is different sorts of stability or lack of stability in young people's background? Correct me if I haven't got that anywhere near, Colleen.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say, really. Like, sort of more challenging, is that more stable for them to be in education? If they're in back with a family, is that more not as stable, or if they're in their own accommodation, is that any to do with travel, getting there, and someone actually being there to support them to get up in the morning? Just those general kind of things. Is there any correlation that you could get some stats on that possible?
Over to you, Ophelia.
I think there's a combination. I think there's a number of factors, and I think the frame behind it is around stability, because we've got young people who are in their own accommodation, who are faring really well and doing well. So I don't think there's one factor, but I think it's worthy of us doing some detailed interrogation of the information, understanding a bit more about our young care experienced young people, because I want to understand our young people in relation to their experiences, and what is it that we've done or could have done differently, and what can we do for our young people coming up. But I think there's some work to be done, and I think it'd be worthy of having some of our foster carers involved, or Colleen can identify some foster carers who could be part of the work that we want to do in relation to that.
Oh, I think that's a really interesting avenue to investigate, really. I don't think there is, Colleen, at the moment, anything that fits what you're asking, but I think Ophelia is offering to look into that and look at what are the factors that make young people more able to be engaged in work or education or training as a forward action. Councillor Marchington, I think you're indicating you want to come in.
Yeah, and again, as a parent of now 2 adult children who actually started work when they were 16, one of whom was 2 days off, of being 16 when he started, and actually looking at what actually the massive positive impact that's had on their life in terms of life skills and maturity and stuff like that. And obviously that's supported, but most of that's going through in the workplace, and also supporting other people I know whose children have sort of struggled a little bit through a standard educational process, but then actually been keen to work, and some of that's worked, some of it hasn't. So I mean, sometimes you get the mantra, there are no jobs, which is not the case, but actually finding appropriate employment with an appropriate employer and appropriate trade. So one example, I know somebody, one young person who'd got a job working in tree surgery and stuff, but the course that they'd actually applied for and got onto at one of the local colleges was then withdrawn. So then everything collapsed. So it's so actually some of that exploration that perhaps we can all as corporate parents could take part in, drawing our own experience. There's still a lot of young people who go on to just college because it's just a stopgap, and actually don't always see employment at 16 as being a really good route. And you can get appropriate qualifications. You actually get quite good high-level qualifications from that if that's your aptitude or what you want to do. So I would be happy to work in and I can probably find you half a dozen young people who've done that, who might be able to share their experience and perhaps be or partners or mentors to talk to young people who want to work and understand the challenge. And it isn't always easy. And I because again, I've got people who've started work, and it's just it is a whole set of life skills beyond actually the skill you need to do the job as well. So perhaps there are young people who could be mentors, supporters, rather than always being us, older, whatever we want to describe ourselves, the corporate parents. And you can understand why some young people don't want anything to do with a corporate parent afterwards, but they might still want some sort of appropriate support.
Thank you for that suggestion. I suspect, Colleen and Keith, that Ophelia may at some point be in touch with you in search of some foster carers who can help them start to do a little bit of research into this as part of that work. We move on.
Yep,
Fine.
We've had Stay Put placement support group, so we can look into that. But we would like to do 16 plus and look at what opportunities there are for children for part-time jobs. Again, we don't get much information given to us except by CAL directly to foster carers. And again, it's the restraint of the children having part-time jobs, health and safety, all those different factors that come into account for our young children. But yeah, we'd love to see our children working and earning a bit of pocket money. And that's what gives them a life incentive then to keep working. So yes.
Thank you. I've just one sort of question I wanted to ask you, Ophelia, if you don't mind. In terms of pathway plans, which are so important to young people who are preparing to live independently, about how they achieve their goals and the direction of travel. And I suppose I'm interested to know how you, or whoever, judges the quality and the standard of those pathway plans.
We do look at those. I think they're improving. I think we've got work to do, and I think we've got to go back and look at much sooner around the pathway plans in relation to what is a pathway plan, what is the young person wanting to contribute. So I think we've got to change the language, I think, in relation to that in terms of pathway plan. What is it? A lot of young people saying, what's my pathway plan? I think we need to look at what are our ambitions, what are our aspirations for you, and how can we support you in doing that. So I think there's something that we need to do in terms of changing the narrative, changing the language, and then thinking much more sooner, working with the virtual school. It's those early conversations that we need to have in relation to their personal education plans, just planning for our children, young people, really, as we would do with our own children, around, well, what do you want to do? How do you want to achieve that? What do we need to do? What wraparound? Do you need to have a Saturday job? We've got to start looking at creating those opportunities for our young people. So yeah, it all fits in really in terms of the work, and it's got to start much sooner than 16 and a half in the work that we're doing. So there's work to be done with our social workers around starting to think that way. And that's why we started to have our personal advisors working with our young people, because they've got quite a lot of skills and expertise in that area. So again, so it's doing a bit more joint up work. So, and again, my ambition is to have personal advisors working with our young people at 16 and a half, 16. I'll keep pushing it.
Excellent, thank you. I don't think it can be early enough, quite honestly, so 16 would be a great ambition. Unless anybody else has got a question or comment, can I move us on to the fostering part of the report, please? Hoping I haven't missed anything else out. Tom Brailsford, over to you.
Thanks, Councillor Kendrick. Tom Brailsford, Service Director for Resources Improvement and Partnerships. So I'll just take you through this section of the report. From March to May, we had 12 new foster care approvals, and there was 11 resignations, but 7 of those were to connected carers. So that's really positive in terms of the change from fostering to connected carers for those children and young people. The number of children and young people placed with Kirklees foster carers decreased at the end of May and is below the average at the moment. And again, we think some of that's to do with connected carers assessments, placements, and some of that's to do with an increased use of IFAs, because again, that's higher than the 12-month average of 104. At the end of May, there's 110 children and young people with independent fostering agencies. The fostering service continues the modernisation agenda, so the website's been redesigned recently, which is really positive and has a smoother process. The Liquid Logic transformation's ongoing, which helps us capture applications and the process a lot better. The other thing to do, we've got quite a proactive media campaign at the moment, so some of you all have seen in the newspaper around Pride Time. We had a really positive article in the Examiner, and we had one previously, and we've also had our Kirklees foster carer celebration event recently, which I believe went really well, although unfortunately I couldn't attend. So I think for us, part of what we're going to be doing is making sure that moving forward, we've got a more robust process for recruiting our foster carers, that actually we've got a really good online presence, there's really good engagement at a quick stage in terms of recruitment, whilst acknowledging that we will be seeing this shift from our foster carers becoming becoming SGOs for our children and young people, or moving towards connected carers. So I would actually expect to see the number of foster carers decrease over time because of that. But at the same time, we really need to continue our campaign to make sure that we can get good quality and high quality foster carers for our children and young people, because we want them in family settings, and that's really important for us. So I think in terms of the other thing to note, Councillor Kendrick, which might be worth the board being cited on, is that because we have got the national sufficiency issue and the regional sufficiency issue, I agreed some extra resources to come into my area of the world, and there'll be an extra head of service starting probably at the end of August, who will focus on the recommendations of the care review. Part of that will be collaboration with IFAs, part of that will be collaboration with all our partners locally around increased in foster care, and part of it will be working on collaboration around the sufficiency agenda. If you want any further details of the information for June, I have got those if you'd like me to go through that. So we've currently got 11 assessments going through process at stage 1 and stage 2. We've had 16 inquiries and 14 expressions of interest in June. And in June, we've had a net gain of 4 foster carers, and a total number of foster carers presently is 173. So happy to take any comments or answer any questions on any of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Any comments or questions, colleagues? Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment really on the media drives and the marketing and that kind of activity that we've been doing to recruit. Even with my limited use of social media, I've come across it and managed to retweet several times, and they are particularly good to look at. They're very slick, aren't they? And very kind of attractive to see. It'd be interesting to see if there's what the spikes are after each of these things are released, or each of these promotions are released, and just to see what kind of effect they have. Unless you have that, I don't know. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. So no, I don't have that to hand, but I think that's part of what we're looking at to monitor, as you say, the effectiveness of that, and we can certainly bring that information back to board.
Thank you very much for that. I'm not seeing anybody else. Can I just say, for me, even when you add up the in-house foster placements and the family and friends placements, we're still one behind the independent fostering agencies, and it drives me crackers, does that. There is anything and anything that members of corporate parenting board can do to promote fostering and foster placements. I'm interested in some thoughts about targeting particular parts of the community or faith groups and what have you, because I still feel there are an enormous number of people in the population who don't know about, understand how you become involved in foster caring and why it's important and why it might be right for them. So any thoughts that anybody has, I think, would be most welcome. No other comments or thoughts on that? Can I just remind... Oh.
It's Colleen again. Sorry.
Hello, Colleen. Come in.
We're just looking at the figures, and when you look at the figures, 12 months ago, we had 244 children with families. Now we've got 171. Although it says that we've actually still got the same amount of foster carers, that's a 30% decrease in in-house placements. And that's quite worrying as a foster carer, that with 30% less capacity, when obviously everyone else is staying the same and the children coming in and coming out. The other concern I've got is that obviously I work for KFN as well. Not work, but I volunteer for the KFN and the helpline, and we see lots more of carers really struggling and not getting as much support because we're rejigging the placement support team. And my concern is burnout after COVID. The other issue, I think, again, which is financial burden on foster carers, is they've had no increase in the skills level in relative terms, especially with the economic crisis for over nearly 8 years now. And I think sometimes that can also be an issue for recruitment and retention. So some local authorities are actually introducing a crisis payment for cost of living. I just wondered if anything like that would be considered for Kirklees carers in the interim, and also whether the skills levels are going to be looked into. I know they are being looked into, but nothing's happened as yet, even though we've been hinting and asking for quite a long time now.
Thank you for that. That was a whole package of things there, Colleen. I'm not quite clear on what you were, well, I'm clear on what you were saying in terms of support for the fostering network. If that's an issue or a problem, perhaps you would email Tom and myself about that. Tom, do you want to come back on the payments and the skills levels, please?
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. I think what Colleen's referring to is the placement support service that supports foster carers, and we're in the process of kind of changing that and modernising that so that actually that's more flexible and, you know, is there to support foster carers as soon as possible, and that's being done through the MST fit side and looking at formulation, which is really positive. I think in terms of the cost of living crisis, I think we need to have a serious look at all areas of our contracts and thinking about how we can better reflect the cost of living crisis. So, Colleen, that's certainly something that I'm definitely having discussions with Mel Meggs as Director for Children's Services for. And I think in terms of the skills payment, as you know, there's an ongoing piece of work which hasn't been progressed as quickly as I would have liked in terms of benchmarking ourselves against other local authorities. So, for example, in certain skill payments, we come out much higher than other areas, and then in other skills payments, we might pay a bit lower than Wakefield or Leeds. So there's a piece of work where we need to kind of equalise that out and make sure that that's comparable across the region. And then the other thing that we've got to give consideration to is, as I've talked about the care review a couple of times, one of the considerations of the care review or recommendations is doing things on a more regional footprint, and that includes how we recruit foster carers, it includes how we look at children's residential care. I'm not a big fan of that recommendation, if I'm honest, but I think we really need to think about how we work with the other authorities across Yorkshire to look at West Yorkshire to look at parity in cost of living and parity in terms of fostering fees. But as you know, we have regular meetings with KFN, and we'll pick this up in the next meeting.
Thank you very much for that. I think if you're looking at revising and improving the support for foster carers, I hope there's a conversation that goes on with foster carers about that. It's about doing it jointly, isn't it? Not separately or doing two.
Absolutely, Councillor Kendrick, and that has been part of our ongoing co-production with KFN.
Okay. Have you any timescale with or a goal, a date for the skills stuff that's been worked on?
I was hoping that would be complete by September, but I need to discuss that with the heads of service involved, so I will update the board and KFN about that.
Thank you very much. Can I thank everybody for their contributions to that one? I know Councillor Marchington has to leave early, and we'll forgive him this time, seeing as I'm going to be virtually at his meeting this afternoon and not in reality. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you. Can I just remind councillors of the challenge that Ophelia put out? It stuck with me as to how we broadcast that to the whole council about what support can be provided for care leavers, what opportunities identified. I'm not sure how we take that forward, but I think we have to think about it and rise to the challenge that she's made. Thank you. Thank you to everybody who contributed to that item. That was really useful. Can I move us therefore on to item 8, please, which is the virtual school governing body update, and Janet Tolley is going to take us through that.
Hi again. So I'm going to take you through this item as Councillor Patterson is chair of governing body, isn't here today, and she usually takes you through the latest governing body meeting. Just to pick up on the point from Councillor Smith, I don't know, I'm more than willing to have a conversation with Councillor Smith about the work of the virtual school, but wondered if one suggestion might be for him to come and observe a governing body meeting where we're talking a lot in detail about the business end of the work. So I will drop Councillor Smith an email and see what he would like to do, if that's okay.
Before you go on, it may be that other members of the board might have an interest and not quite understand the structure of the virtual schools. Can I suggest that anybody who has an interest makes contact with you, and perhaps
that would be great.
Do a bit of a briefing, and then if they want to go to a governing body meeting as well, they can.
Of course, of course. Okay, so if I take you through the meeting, so I've got in front of me the minutes of the governing body meeting, which was held on Thursday, the 9th of June. Just to remind you that the governing body aims to meet half-termly, so it's quite regular. Though we have reported in the past where we've had some issues around being quora. This meeting was quora and well attended. So we went through obviously all the normal business of looking at the minutes of the previous meeting, and then the first thing we had was the staffing update. So just to let you know that we had appointed a SEND lead into the virtual school, Zara Costello. We had previously commissioned out some of this work, but actually it wasn't giving us what we needed for our young people in care. So we now have somebody on our leadership team in the virtual school who oversees things like statutory assessment timescales, issues around those things for our young people in care, and actually uses that role of challenge and support that we have specifically for our young people with SEND education, health and care plans, or maybe we're going through statutory assessment processes. We also briefed the governing body about the change that there was going to be in the leadership of the virtual school. At the time of the governing body meeting, a process was ongoing, but I can update you today that about these changes. So just to remind some of you that there was a new duty put on the virtual school head teacher last September around work awareness raising for children and young people with a social worker or who had ever had a social worker. So just to remind you, initially the virtual school role was to work with our children and young people in care. And as you know, we do that on an individual basis. There'd then been an additional duty for previously looked after young people to give advice and information, which has been ongoing now for about 2 years. This new duty, which was kind of a big growth in the role, was to look at all young people who have a social worker and how we might focus in for those young people on the ways of working at the virtual school and see if we could look at some system changes so that those young people were imbued in the same way. So over the last 12 months, there have been honorariums in the virtual school, so people have been acting up, if you like, and Sarah Hyans and Louise Hallis have been acting up as the virtual school head, and I've been leading on the additional duty work across service. I think this has been quite an innovative model. Some areas, regionally in particular, have only just got started on this work, whereas we've had, apart from the time when I was injured from a skiing accident, we've had this academic year where we've been able to look at maybe investigating best ways forward, talking to other professionals. And actually, to cut a long story short, we've decided that that is the best model moving forward. So we went out to recruitment for a permanent virtual school head post, and my role is to become an executive virtual school head teacher, so that the role of the virtual school for our children and young people in care, which is strong, continues with strength. We don't take our eye off that ball, but I am working now strategically across services for the so what. So what about all these other young people, maybe on a child in need or a child protection plan, and how can we pay similar attention across service to these young people moving forwards? So I'm pleased to let you know that Louise Hallis, who some of you will have met at the last corporate parenting board, was successfully appointed into the post, and she will be in post from the 1st of August, and I will be moving forward with the other work, but obviously closely working with Louise, in particularly coaching and mentoring as she starts on this journey in her new role. So at the point of the governing body, we were saying that was what was going to happen. I'm now reporting to you what has happened. There was then the normal head teacher update, which goes to governors, which goes into a lot of detail. It looks at things like number on roll, it looks at attendance, it continues around PEPs, young people not in full time, the current situation with exclusions, and any information or updates we have around attainment and progress. And actually, the key things there really were what we've mentioned already, that whilst our attendance performance overall nationally is strong, we still do have some concern in our attendance figures and statistics, particularly post-COVID, particularly with a number of individual young people who are what we call PA, so those who are 90% attendance or less. And from the national data, we were also spotlighting on any unauthorised absence reported. And what the governing body asked us to action was that for persistent absentees, exclusion and suspension breakdowns, that we would have a deep dive into the work done. So what we were doing and what we were finding out about those young people, looking at the data over the year, and actually looking at what was happening in other authorities, where there was strength and whether we might learn from that. And that those are the two main agenda items, really. So looking at anything around the persistent absence and the unauthorised absence, so an absence focus, and also an exclusions focus, because we do have a concern. Our gut feeling is that exclusions are up. They're up nationally. So whether ours are up more than national or not, I'm not sure. We will eventually see that in reported data. But whether it is or not, and whether we're performing well compared to national or not, we are concerned around pressures in schools, especially where, you know, it's like a perfect storm, isn't it? Schools are under pressure, staff are off with COVID, young people are off with COVID, there's pressure for catching up, all of that's going on. At the same time, for some of our young people where they're feeling dysregulated, they're feeling less secure, something happens in school and up it blows into a suspension, as they're called now, what was a fixed term exclusion, or heaven forbid, a permanent exclusion. We haven't had a permanent exclusion of young people in care, but we are concerned moving forwards about changes in some of the guidance about what heads can and can't do. So these are really our two focus areas when we review the last 12 months. We then presented to the governing body a finance update and overview. I'm obviously not going to go through that here, but just for you to know that obviously you can speak to the Chair of Governors if you wanted further details. Things are right and proper, that we do have lots of money coming into the virtual school. We are focusing that appropriately on targeting individual needs, and we are using some of that. The way it works is we do that all year, and then we see what we have at the end of the year, if you like, and use that to commission things that schools can't commission on their own. So we have additional choose capacity. I'm smiling at Stuart. We have additional education psychology capacity, so that these young people are prioritised within their schools. In visits, for example, when an education psychologist goes into a school, the young people that are first considered are the young people in care. Secondly, it's anybody who's been previously looked after. And as you would expect me to say now with the new role, thirdly, it's any young person with a social worker before they go into any wider discussion. We had presented some information to the Quality Assurance Panel, and we made sure that governors saw the detail in this, because that was a very, very detailed report. And as part of that report, and as the next agenda item, we then talked about the new duty and the work that I'd been doing. So I'll just kind of briefly talk to you about some of the work I've been doing. It's been very much really about exploration, communication, making sure people are aware of what we all ought to be doing collectively, not just myself as the virtual school head. So I've been doing lots of work across the education provision with, head teachers, designated teachers, for the first time, designated safeguarding leads. So sometimes in schools, the designated teacher and the DSL, the designated safeguarding lead, are the same person. Often in secondary schools, for example, they're not. Talking to them about what it says in the new duty, but also updates in the Keeping Children Safe in Education. So making links with other information that's coming out centrally, and talking very clearly about, yes, you have a responsibility for young people with a social worker in terms of safeguarding, talking to social workers if a young person doesn't come to school, or if, heaven forbid, we're facing an exclusion. How will you make sure that young person is safe at home? But also really stressing that there's a balance there as well, safeguarding first, but actually an equal focus on educational attainment and progress. And what can schools do with parents or carers and social workers to centralise those discussions? Working with social worker managers and teams. I've been going into teams who maybe aren't as used to working with us, the front door team, for example, where, Ophelia's children and young people in care are used to working with us all the time, but other people maybe not so much so, reminding them about the work of the virtual school generally, but also saying, okay, so what's being documented in SIN and CP plans when you're having these conversations, and how can we work better? We did also get groups of head teachers and social workers, advanced practitioners together to look at how we might plan this work moving forwards. Some of the work that I've been doing has been wider than that, so not just young people with a social worker. I've been looking to develop a vulnerable children's dashboard where we look at attendance and exclusion information to see if we can maybe be a bit more proactive rather than reactive, and how we can share information with other professionals in real time. And that work is very much under development and actually being shared at Children's SLT later on this term. So lots of kind of starting work. I'm sure I've not mentioned everything. For me now, it's got to be more than the virtual school head teacher talking to different people and picking up individual concerns. It's now how we make that real step change, so that it's about system change. So that when I'm not here doing this role in however many years' time, the system has changed, so that those young people are having the same attention that our young people in care have. And the things that we've learned around directing individual funding for individual needs is picked up, and that we do track and monitor that strategically. So I don't know how much you will want that information to come to this board in the future. I mentioned it to Councillor Kendrick earlier. I know this is a focus on our young people in care, but if you want any information at any point, I will still attend and bring that to you. And Louise Hallis will be attending as virtual school head teacher, moving that forward. And then, as if that wasn't enough, we also had in-depth presentations. One of the honorarium posts had been looking at post-16 and their 16 and 17-year-old needs, and she presented a detailed report to governors. And then another one of the honorariums had been looking at how we are extending our work from not 3 to 18, but 2 to 18. So if you like, at the other end of the age range. And by the end of this year, we will be working with every young person from their 2nd birthday rather than from their 3rd birthday. So seeing that nursery provision is being accessed and being taken up, and enabling people to understand the importance of that. Even if, for example, if a young person's moving into an adoptive placement, and actually, we understand that those relationships with adoptive parents need to be built, actually, that being an attending nursery and learning some of those other life skills, getting on with other young children's skills are just as important. So contributing more to those kind of discussions as well moving forwards. And then we agreed the next meetings moving forwards and confirmed the 2 main agenda items that I've already mentioned.
Thank you very much for a very comprehensive feedback, Janet. Any questions or comments from anyone? Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Janet. That was a lot to take in, and obviously you've been, you know, the governors are very busy. They've got a lot of work in train, and like you say, it's very much a sense of beginning of work and a lot of directional stuff here, a lot of strategic things going on. So really encouraging to hear all of that activity is taking place. Really is. About achievement and outcomes. Are we tapping into, or is there such a thing as any national longitudinal work about the achievement outcomes of COVID cohort students, if you call them that, that we would be normally interested in this board? Going forward, is there anything set up at the moment that we could be taking part in? Are you aware of anything that
No, I'm not. I'm not aware of anything. I am obviously very active in the regional network of virtual school head teachers, and actually, the national chair of Navish is currently from Yorkshire, a number from North Yorkshire.
Good.
So yeah, you know, we do raise things all the time for Navish to take to the DFE.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting how we track, but it's how we track the cohort generally, as well as how we track the cohort for children and young people in care. I think Joanne's got.
Thank you. It's a really interesting point, and one of the things I think it's due at Cabinet towards the end of the month is our outcomes report. Just looking at general outcomes for youngsters, it's obviously been a tricky couple of years, but that's a really good baseline of information. It really fits with what our ambitions are for all our children, but obviously there's groups of youngsters within that, so whether they're with a social worker, children that are looked after, children with an education, health and care plan, children at SEN support, and how best we plan then to improve those outcomes. Certainly one of the things that the virtual school has assigned to it is a Kirklees learning partner, and it's about how best we can pick out some of that evidence-based practice, things like from the Education Endowment Foundation, because some of the things around being in quartile A, it is excellent. It absolutely needs to be celebrated. Last year was an unusual year. We didn't have Key Stage 2 outcomes. And so this year is the first year back of testing, and that's one way of measuring progress. Actually, we've got much higher quality in the individual personal education plans. So it's how best we track some of that longitudinal, absolutely. What can we do now for a youngster that impacts on their outcomes at Key Stage 2, Key Stage 4, Key Stage 5, and actually into employment, education or training. But we've got that longer term ambition through our Kirklees Futures, which is obviously the whole of the district, but there are some specific groups within that. I think it's interesting and something that we'll undoubtedly take back to the virtual school governing body. Thank you. Interesting.
So, yeah, I mean, we do sort of the next 10, 15 years, we're going to have an eye on all of this. It's a bigger scope than probably we can afford locally or even manage to organise locally. So I do try and keep my eye out for things like that in the press or in the trade magazines, if you like. But yeah, that national scale is really where we need to be able to key into something like that, not invent it at this level. And I think that's just having that in view and seeing where we fit in that with our various different groups, as you were saying, Joanne.
Thank you very much for that. I'm just looking for any other comments or questions. If I could address, while I'm waiting to see anything else, if I could address the issue about the work you're going to be doing with children, young people who have a social worker. For me, that is relevant to this board in the same way that I'm interested in families who take on SGOs, kinship carers, because it is all part of the ingredients about children either being looked after well and properly and safely by the authority, but also how we support children and young people who aren't in the care of the authority, and hopefully we get it so right they don't become looked after children and young people. So I do think it's very relevant, Janet, so I expect to see your face at relevant points in the year, if you don't mind. Thank you. Anybody else? No? If we can move on, thank you very much for that, Janet. If we can move on to the Children's Ambition Board. And as I cannot see Elaine McShane and we have her apologies, I assume this is you, Tom.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. It is, but unfortunately, I know the Children's Ambition Board met, but I unfortunately was off at that time. And so, Councillor Kendrick, if you were present, maybe you would be able to give a summary of what was discussed. Apologies.
That's really, really very mean of you. But Jo is coming to my rescue very quickly.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. Yeah, Joanne Sanders, Service Director for Learning and Early Support. I was with yourself at the Ambition Board, and just in terms of, we had an overview of some snapshots of data that was presented by Kieran Lord on behalf of Elaine McShane, Paul Harris on behalf of Tom and myself. We were looking at all sorts of things in that respect. For example, we looked at suspensions. We've touched on that earlier in relation to children that are looked after, but we're looking at that and how well we were doing, or how we wanted to shift that trend moving forward. The other thing also that the Ambition Board were able to receive was a deep dive into early support data. Which was, it's been in development for some while. So I think the board were quite keen to understand that and in some detail. So that was helpful from colleagues from our early support service. And then we had some partnership updates as well. But yeah, all in all, that focus on data and seeing the progress made around some of the things like family hubs and early support. Don't know if that's helpful.
That's more than helpful and has reminded me a great deal. Certainly the development of MST Fit, MSTE, and the impact that that's had on children it was really, really useful. You can ask a question if you like about the Ambition Board, whether I can answer it or not. Councillor Lawson's considering, but no, he's withdrawing from that. Thank you very much for that. Can we move on to item 10, please, which is updates from board members on interaction with services. I don't know if anybody has got anything to report. No, I know scrutiny have been out, members of scrutiny panel have been out on various visits in recent months. I am aware they were with the social work team in Batley. I know they visited MST, but I don't know whether that's a bit far back in the past, but it's really useful to hear their feedback from that, because it helps triangulate what I think is happening in the world as such. For myself, I was unfortunately unable to go to the Foster Carers Awards and had to send a message because I'd injured my knee and I couldn't even walk from the car park into the venue, so I wasn't able to go, so I just sent a message, and I was sad to miss that. I find it really interesting and always awe-inspiring to hear the work that foster carers do and their long-term commitments that they make. And the one other visit, both Councillor Pattison and I went to the Brambles School celebration, if you like, their official opening, and I have to say, what a fantastic school, both in its layout and its surroundings. I would have loved to have gone to a school like that, and actually so inspiring to see the enthusiasm of people working there and the children, you know, and they're enthusiastic singing and British Sign Language, and well, it was Makaton they were using, to a song that they were all absolutely dancing with pleasure about. a calm and inspiring environment. And we were shown round, we were given a couple of young ladies who showed us round the school, and once they decided we didn't buy it, were very, very informative and so enthusiastic and pointing out their favourite bits and their favourite places. So I can only wish Bramble School to go on to greater strength, because absolutely lovely. And, you know, it was a long, hard journey to get there, and children and staff had to put up with perhaps an environment that wasn't ideal, but they're certainly out in the sunshine now, and it was absolutely lovely to see. So if we no other items for that, I'll move us on, please, then to the agenda plan. And I think some of the things that have been mentioned today need to be incorporated into the plan, and I'm sure that Jodie will address that. And can I ask for some comments, please? Our next meeting is due to be Tuesday the 9th of August, and I have to tell you, I selfishly will not be coming back from Devon to attend that meeting. And it's really, is it a difficult time because of holiday period? Have we got enough members to attend? Because then you can elect a chair at that meeting to go ahead. It's perhaps difficult with not everybody here with us today. Perhaps I could ask, and perhaps you would send out, Jodie, an email to all members and usual attendees to see if they are available to be at the meeting, because if it's going to be like 2 people, then we probably need to move that meeting on. That may feel okay. I'm just looking at particular things that we have within the agenda plan. One of the things that did occur to me that isn't in there, we had the recent JTI inspection, and we should have an outcome from it, and I've lost track of the time scale, whether it would be by August or it would be safer to say by September. We would be able to have some, so are people in agreement that we have that inspection response back at on the September agenda and some feedback on it? Any other issues that we feel need to be added in? I can't recall all the different things that have been talked about. There is a point, Janet, that perhaps you would indicate to Jodie at some point when it would be appropriate for you to come with your particular area of work within the year as well, please. Yes, Jill.
And our health report, annual health report, will need factoring in at some point. I'm writing it at the moment, so we usually bring that, so I'll contact Jodie about that. I haven't been able to just finish it just yet, but it's not far off.
No, see, at the moment you don't know what time.
No, I've nearly finished it, but it always has to go via different people to make sure that it's as it should be, and then it's shared. It's a public document, but we do usually bring it to this meeting, probably. Sometimes it's October by the time we've been able to get in the timescales to actually get it in, because you quite often have other reports come into the board meeting, and it's just to make sure that that's included.
I'm struggling to see if we weren't able to have one adoption from the report. Sorry, I didn't put the microphone on. It was about, I'm just asking about when one adoptions report was likely to come.
Yes, so they've informed us, I think it was September, that they're likely to come, either August or September, so watch this space.
Okay. Councillor Lawson.
Just a comment that September looks to be expanding quite significantly. I'm not quite sure how we kind of just manage flatten out that work in that meeting, because we seem to have ported several pieces into that meeting all at once. But that's up to you, Chair, how you manage that.
Okay, well, we'll have a look at that and try and share it out in a reasonable time scale. Can I ask all members and attendees, please, to look out for contact from Jodie asking about the August meeting, so because we need to be really clear whether that meeting's going to happen or it's going to have to move back somewhere into the year. Right, I think we are therefore at the conclusion of this meeting, unless anybody has a burning issue or question to ask or comment. I'm not seeing anything. Can I thank everybody for their attendance? Can I thank everybody for their contributions, the information and their questions and comments? That's been really useful. And remind councillors yet again that we have a challenge as to how we find opportunities for our children and young people looked after, and particularly our care leavers, and how we get that message out across other councillors, because we need to challenge them and remind them they may not be on the corporate parenting board, but they are all corporate parents. So thank you very much for today's attendance. That concludes this meeting of the corporate parenting board. Thank you.